During the 17th century inside Istanbul's Topkapi palace, black eunuch slaves guarded the Ottoman Harem's most restricted doors and corridors. One terrified eunuch could hear guards approaching, knowing the same palace he guarded could suddenly turn him into a condemned man. And yes, the punishments could be brutal. A lower-ranking black eunuch who failed his duties could be beaten. A powerful one who lost royal favor could be dismissed, stripped of position, and sent into exile. In the ugliest political crises, eunuchs could be imprisoned or executed. But there was an even darker fact behind all of this. Before many of these men ever saw the Ottoman palace, violence had already been done to their bodies permanently. Most black harem eunuchs came from sub-Saharan or East African slave networks. Boys were captured or purchased, moved north through places such as Sudan and Egypt, and castrated before being sold into Ottoman service. Islamic law prohibited castration, so the Ottoman system developed a wonderfully convenient piece of hypocrisy. The empire could buy eunuchs after somebody else had performed the operation. Ah yes, problem solved. Apparently, for many African boys, castration was not simply removal of the testicles. The most extreme form removed all external genitalia. Survival was far from guaranteed. Those who lived could be sold for much higher prices, precisely because so many others did not. That wasn't technically a punishment for breaking palace rules. It happened before palace service. But it was the original violence that made the entire job possible. The harem wanted male servants who could move through spaces where ordinary men were forbidden. Their mutilation became their qualification. Once inside Topkapi, these eunuchs entered another hierarchy. They didn't just stand around holding keys. They guarded doors, carried messages, supervised movement, served powerful royal women, watched princes, and controlled access to one of the most politically sensitive spaces in the empire. The highest-ranking man among them, the Kızlar Asi, or chief black eunuch, could become enormously influential. That sounds like an incredible rise, enslaved boy to palace power broker. And it was. But power inside an absolute monarchy comes with one small problem. Your career can disappear as one person stops trusting you. For lower-ranking eunuchs, failure to perform assigned duties could bring a beating. Discipline was personal, physical, and built into the household structure. You served men above you, learned the rules of your barracks, guarded the correct doors, returned keys, obeyed orders, and stayed inside the limits of your rank. Get it wrong, and somebody could hit you. Yeah. Remember, these weren't free employees filing complaints with human resources. For senior eunuchs, the punishment could look cleaner while destroying an entire life. Dismissal. The chief black eunuch controlled communication between the harem and the outside palace. He could carry messages involving the Sultan, the Valid Sultan, ministers, princes, and court factions. That made him useful. It also made him dangerous. From the 17th century onward, dismissed chief eunuchs were often sent away from Istanbul, commonly to Egypt or the Hejaz. They might receive pensions and retain property, so exile wasn't automatically a death sentence. Some became wealthy local figures. But don't mistake a comfortable exile for freedom. Imagine spending years learning exactly how power worked inside Topkapi. You knew who hated whom. You knew which prince had supporters. You knew which royal woman controlled access to the Sultan. Then one morning your office belonged to somebody else, and you were ordered hundreds of miles away. No vote, no appeal, no 2 weeks' notice. One of the best examples is Hacı Beşir Ağa. He had been enslaved in Ethiopia, castrated in Egypt, and eventually entered Ottoman palace service. He rose dramatically, becoming harem treasurer. Then, in 1713, he was removed from office and exiled to Cyprus. For many men, that would have been the end. Not Beşir. He was later sent toward the Ottoman religious establishment in the Hejaz, then recalled to Istanbul. In 1717, he became chief black eunuch. He remained in that position for roughly 3 decades and grew so powerful that European observers described him as a maker and breaker of grand viziers. Think about that for a second. A boy had been enslaved, mutilated, transported across regions, pushed into palace service, exiled, and then returned to become one of the most influential men in the Ottoman political system. That story sounds almost triumphant until you remember the system never stopped owning the terms of his life. And then it gets worse, because when eunuchs moved from household service into palace politics, punishment could stop being disciplinary and become lethal. In 1651, the Ottoman court was consumed by a vicious struggle between Kösem Sultan, the grandmother of the young Sultan Mehmed IV, and Turhan's Sultan, Mehmed's mother. Both women had supporters inside the palace. Both understood that controlling the child sultan meant controlling the government. The chief black eunuch Süleyman Ağa sided with Turhan. Kösem was killed inside Topkapi Palace during the struggle. Contemporary accounts disagree on some details of exactly how she died, but Süleyman Ağa and palace eunuchs were deeply connected to the operation that destroyed her faction. That should tell you how far the job had evolved. These men weren't merely guarding bedroom doors. They could become participants in coups, succession struggles, secret communications, and killings at the highest level of the empire. And once you enter that game, losing is a very different kind of punishment. Süleyman Ağa's own career turned violently. After political turmoil, he was imprisoned at the fortress of Ibrim in Egypt. He later returned to life in Cairo, but decades afterward, in 1676, he was arrested again. He was sent into exile on the island of Lemnos. Then came the final order. He was executed by decree of the Sultan. God, imagine the irony. A man whose position existed because the palace considered him trustworthy enough to guard its most private rooms had survived slavery, castration, factional warfare, imprisonment, and exile. None of that protected him when the political wind changed again, and Süleyman wasn't living in some unusual side world, disconnected from Ottoman politics. In 1656, during the violent Çınar incident in Istanbul, rebellious soldiers forced the government to hand over officials they blamed for corruption and financial disaster. Numerous palace figures were executed, including senior eunuchs. Their bodies were displayed publicly. That was the final level of punishment. Not simply death, but political sacrifice. When the state needed somebody to blame, proximity to the throne could turn from protection into a target painted on your back. So the worst punishments black eunuch slaves faced inside the Ottoman system weren't one neat list of torture devices. The reality was more disturbing. At the bottom, a servant could be beaten for failing his duty. Higher up, a man could lose his office, income, access, and protection. He could be expelled from Istanbul, imprisoned in a fortress, or sent into permanent exile. And if he became tangled in a succession crisis or factional war, he could be executed, all while carrying the permanent physical result of an operation forced on him before he had any choice in the matter. That's what makes the black eunuchs of the Ottoman Harem such a brutal contradiction. Some became richer than nobles, some spoke directly to sultans, some controlled access to royal women, princes, ministers, money, and information. A few could help destroy careers across an empire. But the door behind them never completely disappeared. For Süleyman Ağa, it finally closed on Lemnos in 1676. The former master of the harem, once trusted with secrets powerful men could only dream of hearing, ended as a condemned servant, waiting for the Sultan's order to be carried out.